So is this revolting attack a sign that anti-Trump hysteria is fueling violence? Does it stand for anything larger? And is the national media downplaying its existence? We're joined now by nationally syndicated radio talk show host Richard Fowler. Richard, thanks for joining us.
Good to be here, Tucker.
So I was interested to see this morning that the New York Times This Week in Hate feature had no mention of this story. Why would that be?
I don't know. I'm not an editor of the New York Times. I think that this story is...
Why did the Washington Post bury it? Why did the Boston Globe bury it?
I don't work at either of those publications, but I will say this. I think this is a hate crime. I'm happy that the new attorney, the new Cook County prosecutor charged these people with this, and it's wrong. And I think what we need to now focus on, whether it's black or white or gay or straight, is making sure that we continue to have hate crime laws like this throughout the country that protect people like this individual that was brutalized by those four maniacs.
Well, I don't believe in hate crimes laws because I don't think you should prosecute people based on their thoughts. But I do believe
So you don't think this is a hate crime?
I think hate was involved, as it often is in crimes. I'm not defending this crime. I'm merely saying it's a separate category. Hate crimes devalue the idea of equality under the law. So I'm opposed to them. But I'm also opposed to lying and downplaying something that is obvious. And it's clear that this man's race and his political position played a role in the torment that he endured. Well, and that's not at all clear from the accounts that were prevalent today. The Associated Press, in its first account of the story, didn't mention the racial and political angles of the story. I wonder why that is.
I don't know. I don't work for the Associated Press. I think what we can say here...
theme here? You got the New York Times,
what I can say here is that the charges came down from the prosecutor, which is the final arbiter. No journalist is an arbiter of this case. The prosecutor is, and eventually a jury of these four individuals' peers, and those came down and said this was a hate crime. It was fueled by race, it was fueled by ideology, and it's wrong. And that's why we need stronger hate crimes in this country to prevent incidents like this and incidents that go the opposite direction.
Yeah. So we can have the government divining our thoughts and prosecuting.
No, that's not what I'm saying.
But here's the point I'm making. When a sensational crime like this occurs, the press is very quick, and people on television are very quick. Instantaneously, they draw massive conclusions. They extrapolate from it, and they say this is a national trend. When that lunatic shut up the black church in the South, Dylan Roof, we had a national conversation on white racism. Now, I'm not against such a national conversation, but if you're going to extrapolate from something like that, why the instantaneous downplaying of this as four crazy people?
I don't think,
and an isolated disabled man.
No, I don't think. I don't think anybody's isolating this at all. I think if you look at the reporting that we've seen today, if you look at people just reporting the facts, which is this individual was charged with a hate crime, which means this prosecutor, based upon the standards for a hate crime in the state of Illinois, thought that these four individuals were in violation of a hate crime, just like Dylan Roof, according to the statutes in South Carolina, were in violation of a hate crime. That's for prosecutors to decide, not for journalists.
Well, but we also draw conclusions from events. That's part of our job here in the commentariat. Simone Sanders, a Democratic strategist on CNN you might know, said this, quote, "This is not a hate crime. Hate crimes are because of a person's racial ethnicity, religion, gender, a disability. It isn't your political leanings because someone doesn't like your political leanings."
I disagree with Simone.
Okay. You had Don Lemon saying, I don't think it's evil. I don't think it's evil. I think these are young people, and I think they just had bad home training.
Last night on the Kelly Files, I called this a hate crime. I was probably one of the first Democratic commentators to do so because it's a hate crime. It's a hate crime. It's wrong. It's vile. It's disgusting. And what this should cause us to do, Tucker, is it should cause all of our Americans, whether you're black, white, Hispanic, Jewish, Muslim, to say, we are moving into a new presidency. How do we come to the table? Because this is not America, right? I would argue, this is not America as a Tulsa, Oklahoma shooting where that man was shot down by the police officer. How do we come together and have a conversation about making our country better? How do we have a conversation about looking beyond race, looking beyond gender, looking beyond realizing that we're all hardworking Americans?
You know the truth, which is you walk into a certain neighborhood, you're the wrong color, and you're liable to get in trouble, okay? That is just true. I know it firsthand. So you can't say that out loud in most venues because it doesn't fit a pre-prescribed narrative.
But that's part of the problem. You need to have these conversations, right?
Good.
So when I go to Friendship Heights, which is in the D.C. area, or any high-end boutique, and I'm followed around by a sales clerk because I happen to be African American, it's the same as you going and getting in trouble in a black neighborhood. We have to have these conversations in order for us to break the stigma down. So when it happens to me, I go to the manager and say, you know, your clerk is following me. I'm in here to make a purchase. This is wrong, and we need to work on fixing it.
A man called Colin Borchers from the Washington Post wrote this, and I think it sort of sums up perfectly the attitude from the left here. If the attackers had been white and the victim had been black, the incident would have, of course, conjured America's ugly history of white mobs committing violence against black people. There's no parallel history of the reverse happening or anything remotely approaching the same scale. Now, that may be right on the merits, but it is an obvious attempt to downplay the significance of this, because what's at stake, as you know, is victim status. And the idea that a Trump supporter might be a victim of a crime based on his political belief. Okay, but nobody wants to give up
the prosecutor
status here.
The prosecutor is very clear in her
determination. Then why are all these liberals trying to say that this is just one isolated example when you've seen time and again?
You cannot. Here's the problem. This is not. I would argue that a hate crime is a hate crime. It's not. It doesn't have a political tilt to it. Dylan Ruth. We don't blame Republicans for Dylan Ruth. No, and we shouldn't blame Democrats for these four.
Are you joking?
I never blamed Republicans.
Well, good
for Dylan
for you.
Ruth.
I'm glad to have one reasonable person on this show.
And I think there's very people. Dylan Ruth is a rage maniac racist.
Were you in this country when that happened? I mean, but by the way, let me just say, I agree with what you're saying.
Right.
But what I disagree with is your unwillingness to acknage what's been happening for the past 3 or 4 years in this country. There's a mass shooting that fits a prescribed media narrative, and all of a sudden everyone
I think,
who supports Trump or is white is responsible.
Let's be very clear. So after the Dylan Ruth case, there was a campaign to take down the Confederate flag from flying over South Carolina, which was the right thing to do. And the governor, Republican governor,
they banned the Dukes of Hazzard from television, as if every Southerner or every person who liked to watch the Dukes of Hazzard was implicated in a crime.
Everything to do. No. That's two different conversations. I think what the Dylan Ruth incident brought to light.
They did that after Dylan Ruth.
Well, let me make the point. Well, after the Dylan Ruth incident, what brought to light the fact that in South Carolina, the Confederate flag flies over the Capitol. Both Democrats and Republicans in South Carolina agreed it was a bad idea. Waving the Confederate flag, which is the flag that stands for racism, bigotry, and hatred, is wrong. As if that had something to do.
Look, it's demagoguery that tries to tie people who are not responsible for a specific crime to. In my mind,
yes,
they banned the Dukes of Hazzard from television.
But we're having a conversation about four individuals who committed a hate crime and the Confederate flag.
Just apply the same standard.
I have
to all crimes.
I absolutely have. Okay. But you can't lump the whole party in with it. That's the argument I'm making. It's a hate crime. It's wrong. It's disgusting. It shouldn't happen. It should be a time to bring our country together.
You're not being honest, Richard. You're not
I'm being absolutely honest. How are you going to tell me what standard I'm applying?
We're out of time.
Good to see you, Tom.
Nice to see you, Richard. Thank you.
Congratulations.
Top U.S. intelligence.